Welcome to Slow and Steady, the podcast where you get to follow along as we build products in public. Each week we'll give you an honest peek into our lives as we share our struggles, our wins, and everything in between. I am Benedicte, and I am feeling haggard.
And I'm Benedikt. Today is March 8th, and this is episode number 130, and I'm feeling productive.
How lovely.
Yeah, right? For a change.
For a change. You do feel productive every now and then. So maybe...
Yeah, sometimes it happens.
Yes. I'm happy.
But last week was not as productive as I hoped. So
have you done anything to help you get into productive mood?
Yeah, I think at Friday, like, funny enough, like last time we recorded, we were both kind of calm and everything's fine and all's good and nothing bothers us. And that changed for me the next couple of days. And Friday night, I was just sitting on the couch, not even watching the news, but just like feeling anxious the entire time, like with like no immediate reason. But of course, I mean, the reasons were obvious. And I just on Friday night decided to not watch any news anymore, nothing at all. Don't read anything. My Twitter muted word list grew by like 10 or 15 words. And I don't know. I don't want to come off as not caring or stuff like that. I just had to pull the plug and just not feel miserable the entire time. And it helped. I had a nice weekend. The weather's nice. We went outside. Been eating at the restaurant for the first time in half a year or so.
Yay!
Several months for sure. And just like had a good time, and not being up to date what's happening in the world was definitely a good part of that. So I'm mostly keeping it up. I mean, I'm checking the news once a day, but that's it. Like, I'm stopping myself whenever I have the urge of like, let's see what happened. I'm like, no, let's not do this.
Yeah, I'm the same. I just check around once a day just to see if there's anything I need to take action on or not.
Yeah.
And then I try to let it be as well. Because there's...
Yeah, and it helped a lot. But weird times.
Weird times. We're going to say that for the next years. On every episode,
I feel like we kept saying
times.
that for the last couple of years, so it didn't really change. It's not that weird anymore. It's just a new normal, I guess.
Yeah, I guess. So what did you do with your productivity focus or your productive mood?
Yeah, so I mentioned last episode that I'm working on an authorization layer for user list, and that has been making good progress. At some point last week, I while implementing this, adding checks everywhere to check that the user is actually allowed to do stuff and things like that. At some point, I realized that the hardest part right now is that we're not preventing the user from doing anything. So I'm adding all those checks, but they always return true. So at some point I realized, I'm not actually sure this is working because I'm not locking anything down. So for a while I had to come up with bogus reasons of why a user is not allowed to do stuff just to be sure it's actually locking things down.
Can you make like a test API endpoint that is like, this should be disallowed for everyone, and then like have a test that makes sure that it returns false, so you know that it can happen?
Yeah, that's basically what I ended up doing. And now, like in our tests for the API, I'm now checking that it's there's a check in there to see if anything is checked, and then there are separate tests that basically evaluate the results of those checks. Mm-hmm. So for now, I'm mostly making sure that I'm checking, and then I can on the other side make sure that the checks return true or false depending on if the account is active or if it's unpaid or stuff like that. So It's making good progress. It turned out easier than I anticipated. Maybe that's because we're not locking anything down, so it doesn't really change that much. But I feel confident that the framework we're putting in place is a solid foundation for the future. The only tricky thing that I still haven't quite figured out is how do we synchronize basically all the permissions and rules on the server side with the front end, because the front end is a single page application, so it's basically running independently. But depending on the permissions on the back end, we need to show or not show stuff in the UI, and I'm not entirely sure how to approach that. And surprisingly, there isn't much information about that on patterns and stuff like that on the interwebs. Like, I kept Googling for stuff. Maybe I have the wrong keywords, but it's not like there are good solutions for this.
No, what would be the keyword for that? It would be like permission-based UX or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. And the problem is, like, you get results for that, but it's usually like how to implement a permission system in a single page application, which is not exactly what I want, because I have my permissions figured out on the backend already. I don't want to replicate the same thing on the front end, because then we're maintaining that on two sides, and that feels kind of stupid.
I mean, you could check for the permission denied, and not like if you have an initial state for a component or initial state for a page or whatever, and then you wait until you get a successful request coming through before you show it. And then if it fails because of permission, you don't show it. Depending on how you bootstrap that single page application, it could make sense to make it either on some components or on like the page level, depending on what you're doing. But then you have to make sure you have those good error messages that are not just like something went wrong, because then you don't know if it's a permission like if it's a, this went correctly but permission was denied, or this went bad because something went bad. But I guess you would have to do something like that where you have kind of an unknown state until you get something back. Or I've also seen some do an initial API call with that first, when you kind of get the when we bootstrap the single page application, you also get the permissions of the person who's logged in. So you have some permissions, and then you kind of trust that those permissions are correct. But if they turn out to be wrong, that somebody has tampered with them, obviously the UX is going to look weird, because you're going to get errors in things that you're not supposed to be playing with. But I realized that is okay. If somebody goes into, and starts changing your code on the front end, and they change their permissions because they think, oh, then I'll have permission, and then they're shown something, and then they click it and they get an error, you do not have permission. Like, that's okay that they saw that.
That's kind of expected, right?
Yeah. So, because I also got a little bogged down with that, because I wanted to make sure, but then it's like, well, if they started tampering with things, or if they're trying to view paths that they shouldn't view, like with POW, if they go in and they try to go to a logged in page when they are not logged in, it's okay if they see kind of that loading state and then they get thrown out, because they're doing stuff they're not supposed to. But you have to make sure they don't get any data they're not supposed to. But when you have those permissions on the API level, they're never going to get that data. They're just going to see wonky UI, and they have asked for wonky UI because they're trying to break your stuff, kind of. So that's I don't know if that was helpful, but I had that revelation where it's like, it's okay to show them wonky stuff because they're trying to do wonky things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, for the most part, I think we can get away with like like trying the request, and if it fails, then show an error message or stuff like that. There are parts though where, for example, with the new pricing we're planning, there will be tiers, so you will not be able to access certain features because your plan doesn't include them. And it would be nice to like update the navigation based on that, like preemptively, and not have to like show it and then they click on it and then they get an error message. That's kind of awkward.
I'm guessing you already get some information about the user when it logs in, and you could add information about their permissions so that you have that information before you're showing the logged in state. But as we said, then they could go in and like change that like array of permissions, but you're just kind of just using those permissions to show or hide UI, so that if they change it and then they see the UI, they will get an error message. So you could like send something with the user object or whatever you have, or account object that you get when somebody logs in, and you send a little list there and you have something to start with, and then you can tighten it down or you don't have to tighten it down because you have this all on the server, of course. Because you can't tighten it down on the client side because it's client side code. Never trust it.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I think that would be the solution in the end, something like that at least. Like tie it down somewhat with like just a generic list of permissions, and then enforce like more granular stuff on a per request basis, and then just like have reasonable error messages. So yeah, I guess that might be the solution. I'm just trying to find the perfect solution.
And are you now?
This is one of the situations where there is no perfect solution, and it has to be something that's a little bit. Well, don't want to say hacky because it's not that hacky, but it's also not like a bulletproof thing. Anyways, yeah. So that part is making good progress anyways, and I think we can maybe roll something out this week. I guess it's one of those projects where we should rather deploy it earlier than later, before like it gets too complicated. Just make sure we don't break it at this stage, and then keep tuning it in the future, and eventually like start to log things down a little bit more. So yeah, that's the one part that we've been working on. The other part is Leo, our front-end developer, has been doing a big refactoring of almost all the form components in our UI. Basically, that it was a mess for the longest time. I started out with just like simple HTML forms. Eventually, I wrote a component to build forms, and that turned out to be a little bit off. So at some point, I built a collection of separate components that composed together would still like act as a form. And then we upgraded the framework, so the old form component broke. And he spent the last 3 weeks or so just ripping it all out and building a new form component and using that everywhere. And we've been rolling that out last week, and it's so much nicer. Validation errors are properly showing again. The code is so much cleaner. And I don't know, it just was like one of those satisfying projects where you take messy code, and in the end you have like neat and clean and well tested and well working code, and it's just so nice.
And even better, somebody took your messy code and made it cleaner and nicer.
Yes.
And you could work on other things, like
absolutely, yeah. So I appreciated that a lot. But what was nice is that during that process, a couple of times we just had calls together and just discussed problems. And I feel like just by pairing on this, we came up with a much nicer solution than either one of us would have come up with in isolation, I guess. So yay, pair programming.
Yay, more people on the team.
Woohoo! Woo. So yeah, that was nice, and it allowed us to remove a lot of old styling code as well. Like we deleted a bunch of legacy CSS, which has been bugging me for a while. And in that process, we also removed a lot of margin hacks and replace them with proper flex gap usage. And I think like this is probably one of my most favorite CSS additions of the last couple of years. Because finally you can define spacing between elements without messing with the elements themselves. And that feels like
it's beautiful.
Best improvement ever.
To go and see that.
So yeah,
some of code I wrote because I've been hacking a little bit with some margins earlier today.
Yeah, I mean, it's been the only way like to use margins for quite a while. But I think at some point I realized like when you work with components, the best way to style them is to not have margins or anything on them at all.
Yeah, I agree.
And only have like the outer component, the thing where it's nested, and handle that part. But until we had flex gap or grid gap, the only way to do that was basically then from the outside add the margins on top of it, and that always resulted in weird edge cases and stuff like that. And with flex gap and grid gap, you just set a value and that's the spacing between things, and you're done. So nice. And you don't have to touch the components. So I don't know. I'm super excited about this. I'm so glad that browsers finally implemented this.
I am happy that we can appreciate things like flex gap. You know, it's good to appreciate the small stuff every now and then.
Yeah,
and see the improvements.
Totally. The next CSS thing I'm looking forward is container queries. So you can you can change styling based on not on the page size, but on the component size. I think that's a huge thing as well, because in user list we have a couple of components that, depending on where they are shown, like have very little space, and sometimes would be good to adjust the styling based on that. But I mean, there are some JavaScript hacky ways of doing this, but there's no good way to do this with CSS, and I'm looking forward to be able to do this in the future. So
it just makes so much sense, especially when you're doing, proper responsive layouts, because you're not saying, browse when it's this wide or this wide. Like I usually never use that many media queries because I just kind of see, like I'll give things, minimal widths or whatever, and then things can rearrange and stuff like that. But then it's exactly that. It's like, well, suddenly it turns into like maybe 2 rows and they get big again. The component gets big, but since it's a small screen, it gets like the smalls, and it's like it will be, I'm just agreeing. I guess I didn't really have anything more to add. I'm just agreeing that it will be awesome when it drops in modern browser, because Chris Coyer did a keynote for GatsbyConf that was last week, and he kind of went through everything that's easier now in the browser compared to before, and also showed some things that are coming, and container queries was one of the things that he was showing. And I think it was a nice keynote because there's been a lot, especially on Twitter, a lot of like grumblings about everything has become so hard now because of all the tooling, and it's become so much harder to make websites. And it's like, well, you can still just write HTML and CSS and host it anywhere, and the HTML and CSS you write can be so much easier because you get all, you got grid, and now you got the grid, the gaps, and container queries are coming, and it's like, it's awesome that things are evolving, but it's evolving slowly, and it has to be if we're gonna keep on having a web that is backward compatible. It can't just go crazy like Apple does. When I made Apple native apps, whenever Apple had a new event, it was like, okay, now my app is broken. Like they never did backwards compatibility. And that's when you realize how awesome backward compatibility is, even though it does slow down things, because you kind of have to make sure you're doing it in a way that makes sense.
Right. And I feel like a lot of the complexity, with transpilers and stuff like that.
Sorry, what is it?
I think it's backwards compatible.
It's backward because the promise of the web is that a website that is made 10 years ago will always work also moving forward. But new sites won't work. But new sites won't work on old browsers Or is that? I need to look this up. Let's look this up after the show because I messed that up. But yes, we understood each other, I think.
Yes, we did. And what I was about to say is that I feel like a lot of the complexity with like modern web development is actually related to us being, well, us wanting to use the new shiny features right now instead of waiting for them to be fully available for everyone. Because I feel like one of the reasons why we have those build chains and stuff like that is mostly because we wanted to be able to use new JavaScript syntax that wasn't available in browsers until like a couple years from now. But we wanted to use it today, so we had to come up with magic to change it into compatible syntax and stuff like that. And yeah, I don't know. It's not always nice, but then again, we could still, as you said, like we could still use jQuery and like use the old traditional way of doing things, but it might not be as much fun in the end. So
I have to learn this over and over again because it is so much fun learning new things, but it does not make you productive if you're trying to make a product or a business that is not the business of teaching other people how to use new stuff. And just seeing the numbers, like how many websites are powered by WordPress, how many websites still have jQuery as a big part of their tooling. Like things move slow, especially in enterprise, and it should, because like if it's working, there's no need to rip out your blog that has been on WordPress for, some people probably had blogs that are like 20 years old now on WordPress. It's no point in ripping that out if it's working for you, just to use some new technology. But when you're hanging out on Twitter, those numbers sometimes kind of get a little bit lost. And I often think, if you're trying to get into tech, I'm guessing also it could sometimes be beneficial to learn some of these quote older techs, because then there are more places you can actually be a productive developer because they are using jQuery, for instance. But yeah, it's interesting though. So this is a good segue into what I've been doing this week. If you're done with your update.
I'm done. Yeah. What's new with
you?
I
have been upgrading my Queen website, and it's on Gatsby.
No jQuery anymore.
No jQuery anymore. No, I tried to make it where I was like hand rolled all my CSS and tried to be very minimal. But then I realized, well, what am I doing? Like I want to become expert more on kind of the integration stuff, not on front end. Like front end is not, I can do okay front end, but it's on the Gatsby side. And in general, I want to be more kind of focused on integrations and how to like piece or duct tape, as I call it, the different parts of the web together. And we are also, I'm going to come to that, but we are also focusing on POW also moving forward. And POW is also on Gatsby, but has been using Material. I use Material UI for the front end in the app. So what I decided, even though I don't know if like, this is the best tech ever, but I decided that all of my things are now going to use Gatsby and Material UI so that I really learn how to customize Material UI and also keep my focus on Gatsby. So that's what I kind of done this week, is upgrade the Queen website, both with content, but also changing it over to Material UI so that we use the same technology everywhere. And I also think that's really good since Ula is coming on board more and more as a coder, and those, like, it's easier for him, I guess, as well, to focus on two technologies instead of following me being like the prototype worst senior developer in the team, where it's like, well, on this project we're just gonna try something new, and on this one page we're gonna test this new framework. And so I'm trying to standardize. It's not that many pages, but it's going to be the Queen site, and then it's the POW marketing website, and then the POW app. And then hopefully we're going to do some really fun, like, marketing little mini pages. And if they also just use the same thing, then it's hopefully going to be easier to jump in and out of different projects. But that's been really fun. I think it turned out really Nice. So head on over to queen.ray.codes and check out the new webpage, which looks very much like the old webpage, just a little bit little nicer. And I also finally got the Done For You integration demo service sales page done. And I, with my new kind of setup where you can make sections and landing pages with different building blocks, I also managed to get like a little new button for the Done For You integration demo on the front page fairly easy. And I was very good. I did not then start making like a new button with like a little icon and everything. I just wrote new and then I called it done, because I cannot be working on this page forever and ever, because today, when we're recording, is March 8th, International Women's Day, aka POW's second birthday.
Woohoo!
Woo! And if you're a follower of this podcast, you might know that I have kind of let put POW a little bit on the back burner since last March 8th, actually, where we had like a big celebration for its 1 year anniversary. Today, we're not doing any celebrating, like public celebrations, but Ula has been in stealth mode trying to recruit team members so that we can be a little bit bigger team. Because if we're going to do this, let's do this. Like, go big or go home, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of, so POW is a very complex product, and especially UI wise and UX wise, and data structure. And I mean, it's just complex. It's dates, it's a cycle, the menstrual cycle, which is not uniform. So there's like nothing is easy with a product like POW. So Ula had been talking to his old friend Jed Wood, who he met in a summer camp in the backwoods of upstate New York in 1993. He's an American, and he, as a developer who's had and sold SaaSes in the past, and is really good on the UX side, not so much like the UI, like design, but like really good at UX, and also how to kind of research to make better UX, I guess. So he is officially on board from today. And then next week, I am hoping to convince my nurse friend to get on board as well for more content, and also as our kind of customer developer, I guess, or whatever it's called, the person who will talk mostly to the customers. Because as a nurse, and also she wants to be a midwife, like she really is interested in the topic, and has also, you know, medical knowledge of the field. And she just moved to Australia. Her kids finally got into school there this week. So from next week, I am hoping that she can also get on board and start doing some work. So this is pretty exciting, because now it's like, it's not me anymore, just me anymore. I have, you know, people who rely on me as a developer, and also as the kind of, you know, the brains behind the ID. And I really hope that that will help us to kind of get this going properly. Because I kind of just like let it be there, be like, well, it's not dying. Like, maybe it will just die. But it's not dying. And I know for a fact, like, loads of people really want something like that. And it's not where it needs to be yet, I feel. And I felt like I was bumping against a little bit of a skill. Just like you said, with Leo, having somebody to talk to, you can actually come up with these ideas. And it was hard to realize how to do a lot of these things alone.
Yeah.
So hopefully being more people, even though they're not developers, it will be helpful in just like setting the strategy for which features we're going to focus on, because there's many ways we can take this. I decided early on, I don't want POW to be for the people who are trying to get pregnant, because they have a very specific need and a specific set of features that is very much served by some of the other apps. So we're trying to figure out a path where we focus more on the planning or understanding of your cycle, or like understanding of your cycle, so that you can plan your life better and understand yourself better. Like some, as it's not the positioning is not done. The positioning work is not done, as you can hear. But
it's never done.
it's never done. No, but somewhere around there, where it's like more focused on for people who would like, to work with the data more on their own, and like want to get to know themselves better, kind of, and then also use that data. Because right now I talk to people and they are very much for the logging, but it's hard to get them to verbalize what they're actually using it for. And I even have a hard time verbalizing what I am using it for, even though I do feel like my own app helps me. So we were talking on the pre-show, I'm feeling haggard, and I actually checked this now. This is so since it's International Women's Day, we're talking about periods, folks. This is day 18 of my cycle, and I am feeling haggard. I feel like I just want to sleep. I feel like I am not doing really good work. And then I thought to myself, wasn't it about like 4 weeks ago, I didn't want to read that testimonial email that you might remember me talking about if you heard that episode, where I ended up watching Netflix for a whole day. And then when I read the testimonial, I almost started crying. So I went into my app now to check what day of the cycle I got that email. And that was day 17. And today's day 18. So like this kind of knowledge is helpful, because I don't feel like I should go talk to a shrink right now or like do anything major. Like this is pretty normal at this time for me. So I'm just trying to just lay low, do my work, and not let those little voices in my head kind of get me into like, I need to fix this mode, which I have done in the past. So that's like it gets personal when you work with an app like POW. And I guess that's also a little bit what scared me there for a while, but I just got to own it. Yeah. So that was the update.
What's the deal with the new team members though? Like, are they employees? Are they getting ownership? Are they doing this because they like you so much? Like,
right now they're doing it because they like me so much.
Oh,
no,
nice.
I think we are doing kind of a test run now where we're trying to work together. And if it works, then Jed also has some ideas that he wants to work on later, so that maybe we can make several, like down the road, can work on several products together. And then I'm like, ownership will be different for the different products, but that is not kind of written down yet. So we're going to work together, and then we're going to see kind of how we do it legally, because like he's in America, I'm in Norway. Like I need to there's lots of things that I need to figure out, like on the legal side of things. But I think like we will work towards, like they will get partial ownership is what we will work towards. And I really found it interesting when we were speaking about the whole vesting thing, because I'm guessing something like that, where like they get part of the company for every month they work. And if they stop within the first 3 months or whatever, then it's not gonna, or some kind of, you said some kind of break point. But we're gonna try, and then we'll see. And if they turn out to be really good, well, then they can negotiate really hard then in a couple of months when we're ready to when we're ready to do this. Yeah, but this is a part of that. I've done so many projects before, but they've always kind of stayed small, and it's been more like side project or just like fun learning project. So this is something that I have very little knowledge and very little experience with, but that it's been helpful talking to you and also listening to some of the other podcasts to kind of figure out how, like, the many different ways this can be handled. So that was a non-answer for you.
Well, it answered my question. And my one piece of advice I want to add for that is like, don't wait too long with having that conversation about like agreeing on terms and setting expectations straight on all sides. Because if you wait too long, like, the conversation will be harder because they might have like more on you to negotiate with, and if you don't come on agreement, people will be more upset because they spent like, I don't know, half a year working on something and now getting nothing out of it in return. So don't wait too long.
Noted. And also Ula is kind of the lead on that part of POW, trying to assemble a team and work on those kind of deals. He is a better negotiator than I am. I'm like, I'll give you half the company if you just like write some blog posts. I need some blog posts.
Might not be the worst idea ever.
But it's bad if that ends up being 2 blog posts and suddenly like my company is gone.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. But as we learned, I did actually go to I went to a entrepreneurship program when I was in university, and they probably talked about these things, but when you don't have any actual case in your own actual real life, it's harder to understand what they're talking about. But I do remember them talking about it, like it's better to have a small piece of a big pie than a big piece of a small pie or something like that.
Yeah, unfortunately that's true.
Yes. So I feel like I've kind of tried to make my pies very small and have the whole pie. So I'm trying to grow the pie a little bit bigger and maybe not then have as large of a piece of it as I used to. And that's more than, finance. It is also control and the control over the positioning and the path and the strategy and all of those things. I will need to let go and let other people have a say.
Yeah.
Which is...
That has been a learning experience or a learning step for me as well, like when we founded Userlist, because in the past I've been in a similar boat of like, no, this is all mine and I'm controlling everything and I have to say
this tiny muffin is mine. Nobody touch it.
Yes. And unfortunately it always stays a tiny muffin and it doesn't grow. And letting go for the sake of it growing a little bit more and you just having help is, in the end, I think it's worth it.
And I also think with the landscape that POW is in, it's not a tool for other developers that can kind of it can't stay as a muffin. I mean, if you make these tools for developers, they are quite savvy people. Like if you sell a SaaS starter, or if you have a SaaS that helps somebody do like a very specific thing, it's easier maybe to stay smaller. But here we are touching, it's gonna, without us doing much, it's gonna be political. It's gonna, it has to do with health. And also it's just, as I said, it's surprisingly complex, which is part of the reason why these apps aren't as good, and also part of the reason a lot of people do not really have a grasp on their cycle, because what we're taught in school is a very schematic average version of a menstrual cycle, and it turns out the variations are really large, so that what we kind of learn in school, it's not often, I hope it's better now, but it's often not emphasized how this is a very very simplistic kind of generalized sometimes averages are not that big of a variance on the average, and it kind of fits. But then with menstrual cycles, it's a lot larger. And also in my upbringing, I guess in the 80s and 90s, we pretended it did not affect us. It was like, like I don't notice any changes. Like I am, I'm basically a man. It's fine. But I'm seeing now that younger generations and also more people are kind of being like, well, there are actually things that happen. It's quite large, hormonal changes and stuff like that. And people are taking it more serious. So the point being is that it's going to be hard to keep POW a small muffin, which is now the metaphor we have for it. A small cupcake. A mini
Yeah.
cupcake. It's gonna be a mega cupcake. No, but it kind of, and that's also, I think I got a little scared. Like, it wants to grow. Like, a lot of people get interested because it is an aspect of both tech and, I guess, society that is a little under
Yeah.
under something, which is very on the point for International Women's Day. So this good discussion for International Women's Day.
Totally.
Totally. So yeah, but that's it. Like, oh, meetup in London. So whoever is listening who lives in London or can travel to London on Wednesday the 16th, that will be next week. There's going to be some kind of thing happening in Chelsea. And I'm thinking lunch or after work. So if people could DM me on Twitter with their kind of preference, if they want to hang out, somebody has already done that. So I think we'll at least be like 4 or 5 people. But it would be really nice to have a little impromptu, I guess, slow and steady meetup then. Let's call it that.
Yeah.
Slow and steady
that's so cool.
pirate meetup. Because my ex-co-pirate Paul I'm going to meet him for the first time. The person I did my streams with.
So cool.
In the beginning. Yeah. So just DM me and I'll make a little group or something and notify everyone of where and when. But it will be sometime on Wednesday next week, 16th. March 16th.
Jealous now.
Well, you could always jump on the plane.
I can always just travel to London for lunch.
I could hook you up with a bedroom in the loft of my father's house.
Now you're tempting me.
Yes. Yes. Do it.
Yeah, I don't know. But whoever shows up and whatever you do, and have a nice time and enjoy it.
Yes.
So that also means you'll not be here next week, right? So we talk again in 2 weeks.
Yeah. So next week, everyone gets to hear from Brian again.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I mean, it would be nice to have you on as well, but I'm looking forward to talk to Brian again.
Yeah, I'm sad I don't get to be in on that, but I'll be enjoying London. Hopefully there will be sun and cupcakes, because now I really want cupcakes. I want the whole cupcake.
Sounds good. Well done.
That's it.
Have a nice week.
See you around the interwebs.